Welcome everyone to the Black Wall Street Speakeasy. My name is Selena Higgins. I'm the Executive Director of Knox Street Studios. This partnership and this program is to increase political awareness in the business community. The partnership is between the Greater Durham Chamber of Commerce, Black Wall Street, and Kompleks Creatives. I am joined today by our two mayoral candidates. I'm excited to be here with them. This, for me, is a moment of pivotal joy because I'm a new leader myself, and I consider this year to be the year of the woman, the year of the dawn, right? And so I'm happy to have you all here and to have a conversation. I would like to start by having you all introduce yourselves, share a little bit of what you do outside of the political space, what do you enjoy doing, and then talk a little bit about your campaign.
Good morning, Selena. Thank you for having us here today. I'm honored to be here. My name is Elaine O'Neill. I am a lifelong resident, born and raised here in Durham. In my off time, I'm retired. I retired from the bench after 24 years of service on the district court bench, superior court bench, and then I went to my law school, NCCU School of Law. I ran that as an interim dean for about 2 years, and so now I am running for mayor. My campaign is basically, first of all, I love my hometown, and it has loved me back by electing me and putting me in positions to be a leader. I do believe that I possess the skills now for the new job, the new task ahead as mayor, first of all, to unify us as a city. I've not really seen my hometown this divided in a long time. And so that will be the first of, that's the first call of business, to see if we can get us all moving in the same direction and at least talking with each other at the table. So I'm sure we're going to talk more. Yeah. I'll just leave it right there.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much, and thanks so much for Kingfisher for hosting this. To Sean and Michelle, you're a very treasured bar in Durham, and I'm glad that you weathered the pandemic well. I know that wasn't easy for a lot of our small businesses. I'm Javiera Caballero. I'm a Durham City Council member. I've been in my seat for almost 4 years now, since January 2018. I'm a mom of 3 kids. I don't call Durham my hometown. I didn't have the fortune and privilege of being able to stay in one place for many reasons. So I immigrated from Chile, South America in the early 80s due to the Pinochet dictatorship, where lots of Chileans had to flee from violence and political turmoil and also economic turmoil. My dad was a math professor. He was fortunate enough to get support in the United States so he could continue his studies. And we eventually ended up in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I lived through high school, middle school, and then went to Appalachian State. And then left, went up to Chicago, had my 3 kids, and when the recession of 2008 hit, it was a terrible time for a lot of folks in architecture and design, and my husband's an architect. The bottom fell out. He was unemployed. We had 3 kids, including a newborn, and so we moved back to Charlotte to live with my dad. It took him 15 months to find work, and he ended up getting work in this area, and we have stayed. We've been here for over a decade. I'm married. He grew up military, never thought we'd stay put in one place because that wasn't the childhood we had. And it has been an incredible blessing and so amazing that we've been embraced and been able to provide a very different reality for our kids than what we were raised with. As a city council member, I was the first Latino elected leader in Durham and one of the first in North Carolina. And it's been a tremendous privilege to support and represent my community.
Yeah, thank you both. And you both open up that door as female leaders. So let's talk about that. You all just pioneered something really amazing. I'd like to hear your take on it. How are you feeling right now? What is resonating with you the most about this opportunity, this new path, right, that you guys are both pursuing? Yeah.
Well, you want to go first on this one?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay.
We'll let you go first.
So I say this, and I get that this conversation maybe is not supposed to be political, but the thing that I always kind of marvel at as being a city council member is the last 4 years have been extremely challenging, not just because of issues in Durham, but because of issues broadly. We did not have a federal government that was a real partner. We still don't have state government that's a real partner. And when you're a local municipality, your resources are real limited, especially in North Carolina, where pretty much you can only raise taxes through property taxes. You're limited as a city. And so we the work that we've been able to accomplish with those challenges is incredible to me. And I think it's because we've had superb leadership in our current mayor, and I think we have a really strong council, and we are willing to do what I call the Durham way, which is to look around and figure out how you're going to solve a problem, even when there are lots of insurmountable challenges. And I want to continue doing that work, and I want to build on that momentum.
I guess what resonates with me right about now, having been here for so long, is the fact that parts of Durham are really thriving. You know, they've done really well. This used to be the Perry building. The Perry family is one of the old Durham families that I know. We were in school together, and so parts of Durham have done really well. But for 24 years, as I sat on that bench, I saw a world that most people don't interact with. And you can really have it where it's invisible, where you can really not look at it if you're not involved. And that world has been in distress and continues to be in distress. So, and they become visible most of the time when you see them on the news. And so I've been disheartened by that because it doesn't have to be. You know, you shouldn't have a tale of two main streets where on one end of Main Street, everybody's doing really good or seem to be. And on the other end of Main Street, you have bodies in the street of our young men. And a lot of those families I know, I've worked with. I know them through relationships outside of the judiciary as well. So it is my desire that no one be left behind. And I do think with the skill set that I have, that I'm able to cross into different cultures and expose what is invisible to folk and then bring us together in a way that we can move our community forward so that no one's left behind. So that's what's resonating with me. Let us see our neighbors and become neighbors again.
So every election cycle, we say that this is going to be a pivotal year. Durham's change is dramatic and for some very, very, very uneven, right? But in what ways can the city improve the conditions of public housing, right? Let's start with that, and the focus being, you know, more particularly on McDougal Terrace.
Well, one of the things that, you know, having been in and out of McDougal all of my life, my first husband grew up in McDougal. My aunt lived right around the corner from McDougal, so I know that neighborhood well. One of the things that I know we have to do, as I mentioned earlier, is you have to center the voices of those who are being affected. As middle-class people, a lot of times, we can tend to say, okay, these are the right solutions, and this is what we're going to do. But what I found in my leadership on the Racial Equity Task Force is that a lot of our more distressed residents feel like they don't have a voice at all, that they're not being heard at all, and decisions are being made for them and not with them. So one of the key issues that we determine that has to happen is those voices have to be centered. They have to be a part of the process and actually lead that process in terms of what can help them. They're well and able to do that, but we don't hear them unless something tragic happens, like what happened. I've been around long enough where I recognize that McDougal hadn't been renovated in many, many years. And that's true not only of McDougal, but Cornwallis and Hoover Road and Liberty Street, which is now being done. So it's not just that one neighborhood that is in need of services, but in each neighborhood they have leaders who are well able to tell us how to help them. And now we have enough people who've been doing this work for such a long time, like myself, who are able to go in and help to bridge the gaps between their distrust of government and what they actually need from government and begin to make that happen. So that's the first thing that we have to do. We need to listen to folk and figure out where they are and what they want to see in their communities, and then we help to bring those wishes and desires to light.
Okay, sounds good. That call to action piece for them. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a excellent question around what do we do with our many of our public housing communities. I think Durham has taken a very different track. Our housing authority is a function of federal government. Most of its funding comes from the federal government, and unfortunately, the federal government is not interested in doing public housing the way it has been done historically. And so the reason we're seeing the decay in a lot of these communities is because there isn't the dollars from HUD, which is the federal authority or federal department. And what has happened in so many cities is that cities have kind of distanced themselves from their housing authorities, and essentially that housing eventually becomes so subpar it's condemned, and those affordable housing units are never rebuilt. And Durham has taken a very different pledge and commitment, which is one of the reasons we passed the largest housing bond in North Carolina history in 2019 with 76% voter approval, which is quite amazing. We did not increase the property tax that voters said, yes, you can increase my property tax. We didn't do that in 2020 because of the pandemic. We didn't feel as a government it was the right thing to do to our residents when there was so much lack of clarity as to what was going on. And so that property tax was just added to everyone's bill July 1 of 2021. The housing strategy that the housing bond lets us do does let us redevelop several of our housing authority properties, and that work has already begun. Is it all of them? No, unfortunately it's not. The process to do that is, it's really technical, it's called a RAD conversion. You essentially have to bring in private investment to help redo it, and you do that by adding basically more units. And the trust around that is, there's not a lot of trust around that, because the last time the federal government tried to do this, which would have been in the early 2000s around the Hope 6 program that many of us remember, where a lot of our housing communities were torn down. I think Chicago, Cabrini Green came down, Robert Taylor Homes, these kind of quintessential housing projects that everyone knows all across the nation came down, and those things never got rebuilt. And so the distrust is real. And so what I think we need to do is ensure that what we said we were going to do as a city, we are doing. And I think that we have made some really important steps to communicate that transparency. You can go, I think it's called Forever Durham. It's a website. You can track what is happening with what we said we were going to do with the bond, where units are in the process. I was just at Willard Street last week with an amazing ribbon cutting to show that the affordable housing we are building is top notch. It looks better than the market rate housing right there. And that's the template, because we know that folks deserve really good housing regardless of their income. And I feel that Durham has made that financial commitment and made that resource allocation, and I will continue to fight for it.
Thank you both. I'm going to jump to a question because I'm hearing kind of thoughts from both of you, so I'm going to jump down a little bit. So what does Durham need in order to move to a more equitable city for everyone? What does that look like?
Yeah. We need a lot. I think that we are on, and I think the Race Equity Task Force was a testament as to the work that we know needs to happen. I think that there's a complete reorienting of how we, for lack of a better word, how we do business as a city. And that is a long journey. That is undoing decades and centuries of not centering people's voices, of not dealing with white supremacy, of covering things up instead of being honest about what our legacy and history is. And so the last 4 years, I feel there have been some pretty significant commitments. Are we done? Absolutely not. I will say that for me personally, one of my commitments has to really been to bring in the immigrant and refugee voices into government. We don't even know that these communities exist half the time. It's not even about, they're not getting their needs met. People don't even know they're here. So it's like a level of barrier that is beyond what we historically think about. And that's something that I've worked diligently on as a council member that I will continue to do. And I think that we're not done. There's a comment where local government is slow, the state government is even slower, and the federal government is even slower. And that's true. And it's really frustrating when you're in a position of power, because that is it takes a minute to get a thing going. As I said with the affordable housing strategy, we passed that bond 2 years ago. So you can sense the frustration from the community. And so that's something we have to do better about, is communicating. Yes, we said we were going to do a thing, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight.
Well, what does the Bull City need? I would agree with Javier that we need a lot. But what we need most of all, I think, is committed leadership at all levels that can sit at the table with each other and come up with solutions that are not just one-sided. Okay, right now the political tone in our town is very much divided, and I think that's good. That's what a democracy is supposed to be, but it can't be one way or the highway. There's enough room at the table for all of us, and it's enough room and enough work to be done that we're going to need everybody to do their part. So the one thing that I think that we have to begin to do is do something that I saw growing up. We were neighbors, you know. We knew our neighbors. We cared for our neighbors. One of the things that happened on the West End community, when somebody died on the West End community when I was growing up, all of the neighbors would get together and make sure that that family had a wreath on their door. Now, that may seem like very trivial, but it was not. It let you know that your neighbors saw you. And not only that, they cared enough to do something for you in your time of need. The young people and the folks that I saw, so many of them have no opportunity. It was amazing to me that by the time a young man, particularly an African-American young man who came through that system, got to be the age of 18, they lost all hope of ever tasting or seeing or feeling the American dream. It was gone. They never saw themselves anything other than dead. And a lot of them did end up dying. And I saw those young people. I have a kid who was on my caseload back, I think he was probably about 15, 16, high-ranking gang member. He was just a natural-born leader. I took to that young man, and I remember pulling him in court one day after court, and I said, you know, you got to stop this because you're going to die in these streets. You got to stop. Well, he ended up getting shot, and he ended up being paralyzed from the waist down. But you know what? When he got out, he changed his life. He went to prison, got out, and has changed his life. And now he is a part of Bull City United, right? And it's a very hard road for him to walk because now he's straddling between doing the right thing and helping others like him that were like him to pull them along the way. But that's what we absolutely have to have. You know, we have to have those young people, the adults like myself, who can speak into their lives and say the behavior has to stop or you're going to die in these streets, and then make a way for them to be productive. This is not rocket science. It really is not. But it does require the human touch. And the one thing that you'll hear me talk about that most politicians will probably never say is the only thing that'll last and change Durham is love. The love for your neighbor and the willingness to make that an action word in more ways than one. My skill set is in the judiciary. That's where, you know, and running public agencies. But at the end of the day, when I sat on that bench, they saw my heart, even though I was doing the job. So you just can't not come to this work and it's politics as usual. Not right now. There is a sense of urgency, especially in the African-American community with these young guys. There's a sense of urgency that requires a caring touch to be able to help them to transform their lives. That's what Durham needs most, is for us to be neighbors again and to hear each other and then respond to those needs.
One of the things I've heard both of you talk about is and what just sounds as you guys are talking is the notion of family, right? Family, the protection of family, equitable opportunities for all families, right? And I just recently read, and this is more on the economic development side, but Durham will be receiving $6 million, right, for reparations. And in this article that just came out, ABC posted this, and in this, the funds are going to be used to green initiatives for housing communities in the Black community, right? And with that, it's such an amazing thing. And I want to hear from you all, What are your thoughts on that? That $6 million is going to be going to the green initiatives and the Black communities. And we talked about McDougall Terrace, not only McDougall Terrace, but other communities that need this support. You know, what are your thoughts on that $6 million and going into that green space and how we're going to be using that to create inclusivity, to create more community, loving thy neighbors? I'd like to see some more reefs being done. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Just for clarification, are you talking about $6 million that the city is changing over to green and infrastructure? Because we added $6 million annually to our capital improvement plan, specifically around green and equitable infrastructure. And then there's also the federal. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So the federal money that we're getting is massive. We're going to get over $50 million of ARPA funds, so American Rescue Plan money. That is not that's besides what we've gotten for rent assistance. It's beside what we've gotten for COVID support. It's an additional amount. And that is a game changer. I will say that in the summer of 2020, when we were not getting the federal response and we knew that our local dollars were never going to stretch far enough to support the need that was already there, right? We already knew that these issues existed. We already knew the inequity was there. And to then know that you weren't ever going to be able to support the need in the community was a really hard place to be in. It was very demoralizing as an elected leader. It was quite frankly terrifying because you knew what the need was. You knew what was about to come. You knew about the evictions that were going to happen. You knew about folks not having enough food in their home. And you also knew the dollars just weren't going to stretch. So then when we got word about the support we were getting as a city, it's transformative. What we have decided to do is actually ask the community, how should we spend these dollars? And so there are several proposals, and there's a process that was just shared with the city council probably a month ago now. And there's a rubric we're going to be using that includes equity, includes all of these things, all of this kind of orientation that I'm talking about how we do business differently, so that we can ensure that those dollars are going to the right place. And that's other communities are doing it differently. Other cities are doing it differently. One thing we did do was ensure that our workers got another round of hazard pay. We gave bonuses, things like that, because we wanted to really make sure that the city workers who kept the city running, I don't know if folks noticed, your trash and your recycling came on the dot every week. Your water was still clean. Everything still kept moving in the middle of a pandemic. And that is something I'm extremely proud of. And I'm extremely proud of our city workers that kept a pretty big city going. So that we did do that with that money. But there's 2 tranches of it. It is going to be transformative. I'm eager to see what proposals come forward. I know that there's the idea is to essentially, re-grant the money into the communities that need it, and ensure that those folks get that economic support that they deserve.
I guess for the people who have left behind, like I said, I kind of lived in that space and kind of know it. The problem has been that we have gotten monies, maybe not this massive amount, but it didn't end up in the right place. Mm-hmm. And there was an article recently by Carl Kinney. He does a blog, and he talked about the participatory budgeting process that the city has started, and there were some ties to people in that process that he talked about, and I invite you to go see it. But that's the kind of thing. Now he's a journalist. I just invite you to read it. You get your take on it. But those kinds of things have set in motion continued distrust of a government, right? Where there's lots of money that comes in, but it doesn't filter down to the right places. So how do you ensure that? How are you going to make sure that when you get $50 million, excuse me, it can't look like what it's been looking like? Because they're already talking about, okay, in this process, didn't really transfer like that. There were some ties in there. So I think it's very important that when you talk about that kind of money and knowing that we will never get it again, that we make promises that we do keep, and that you're very transparent from the very beginning of your process. And your process needs to be articulated and clear and easy to navigate, right, for folk to become involved. And your government has the ability to do that. within neighborhood improvement services under the direction of Constance Stansel. When we went out on the racial equity task force and they introduced us to the community, that was the resounding theme. We don't trust the city to do what they said they're going to do. They've not done right by us. And we were astounded at that. And we had to really kind of distance our work and let them know we are volunteering as a task force, and these are the things that we're going to present back to the city as recommendations to help them to understand just how far off the mark you say they are. So it's really good that we're going to get that kind of money. But it will be really bad if it does not end up in the right place and your process is not clear. And you don't have folk who are closest to the pain, being closest to the process to lead and help lead that effort. So I'm excited about it, but I'm also looking sideways like, okay, and that's why I want to be a part of it. Because I know what folk are saying. It's the same song that's been sung, and it continues to have a verse and a refrain. And this time, I have the trust of my community in a lot of ways. This time, you're going to have a trusted leader to make sure that that money gets to the right places and there's not all of this kind of shadiness that folk talk about.
So I actually want to push back a little bit on that. First of all, the city of Durham has time and again been nominated. I think the last time we were the third or fourth best run city in the United States. I've lived in other cities. I've lived in exactly the kind of place where you talk about. I think one of the wonderful things about Durham is it is a manager-run system. So the way that works, compared to a strong mayor system, is when there's a mayoral changeover, the top heads all flip over, just like at the executive level of a governor or a president. It doesn't happen in Durham. Often the staff stays the same. We have a brand new city manager who's Wanda Page, who's excellent. None of our staff flipped over, or very few flipped over when she became city manager, which is not the same. There's continuity in staff, which I think in some cases makes it easier to be a better run city. The participatory budgeting, the last time that we ran it, just so folks are full disclosure, it's a resident-driven process. It's actually letting folks determine how we're going to spend city money. So it's a portion of the budget that we set aside, and it's allowing residents to have direct decision making. I was in the room when we created the process. The steering committee is resident driven. It means people were appointed to those seats, they applied, they were picked, they were put there, they created the process themselves, and council responded to that. And then those asks were put out in the community. There was a ton of work done, including with Central students, on which projects do we move forward? How do you do it in an equitable way? There was a lot of discussion around, well, we don't really need to put more dog parks in affluent communities. We need to make sure that the communities who don't get or haven't gotten what they deserve get it. So when you look at the projects that were put forward in the first year, they were all in communities that had been neglected or had not received what they deserved. This last round, what we did was re-grant to nonprofits, because what we were hearing is that there's a lot of need in the community. So let's re-grant this public money to smaller institutions that are already, or smaller nonprofits who are doing the work already. Residents voted on that. That wasn't council, that wasn't staff. That was a ballot that was put forward in front of Durham voters, and we had good turnout, considering we were in the middle of the pandemic. And I think it's actually been a game changer, because what we've allowed to happen is we let people 13 and over, regardless of documentation status. These are people, 13-year-olds pay taxes too. Undocumented people pay taxes too. And this is allowing them in a process, a civic process. When we talk about creating a city that is more neighborly or more inclusive, this is how you do it. You bring people into the process. You ensure that the process is transparent. You encourage them to participate, and they're getting to decide, what are we doing with your money that is public money? So always open. It's a brand new thing. We've done it 2 cycles through. There's obviously opportunity to improve it, to make it more transparent, to communicate it. But to say that that is a shady process or a process that's somehow corrupt, I fundamentally disagree.
I didn't say that. Let me push back a little bit too. I didn't say that. What I said was that there's an article out there written by a well-respected journalist in this community who speaks to different audiences, and it talks about how that money landed. Now, whether that's true or not, it causes that in certain communities causes shadiness because of the relationships that he's alleging that people have and had within the political process and within how the money was distributed. Now, whether it was true or not, perception is everything. So when you have those type of perceptions out there that we have this money, the community is participating, but it ends up in a manner that calls them to question relationships. You have to deal with that. It's in the public arena. So at that point, and to another issue that's sort of kind of the same, when we talk about transparency, I've lived on the West End all of my life up until, I'm still in the outer West End. We have a family home on the West End, right, that my older sister still lives in. Up until about 5 years ago, my father bought that property in the 1940s. Not a lot of land, but up until about 5 years ago, we couldn't build back there. We could not build back on the back of that land, right? Now, we have a person who's on the council. They have built 2 houses that abut my family's property, right? So we see that. So you can't say that doesn't matter to people, because perception is everything. When people think that folk are in positions of power and they are also in charge of rezoning and all of those things and how you mete out money, we have to be really careful that the perception is always that we're going to be fair and impartial and transparent. That's all I'm saying. So that's what's out there. I think that needs to be addressed so that people going forth, and not saying that it was done that way, but I can tell you from the West End perspective that we're looking at it, because we live there. We've been there for 50 years. So we have to be really careful that people are aware that folk are walking the walk and talking the talk, is all I'm saying. Now, it's out there in the public eye. Whether you disagree or not disagree, I think is incumbent for elected officials to say, this is the process, and this is how we're going to do it, and everybody's going to get a fair shot at it. And so that's my point. Not to say that what you all have done, anything is wrong. I love the idea of participatory budgeting, but when you have a noted journalist to put that type of information in the public eye and nobody responds to that, it doesn't look good. And that's not a look that you want when you have that type of money coming in. You want to make sure that people trust you to do what you say, and that nobody can come back and say, okay, it just doesn't look right to me. And I'm not the only one that shares that perception. I just think it needs to be cleaner. Whatever process is implemented when this kind of money is coming in.
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation, and I like to add an additional question that may take us a little bit deeper into this conversation, right? So can you talk about how you will broadly support local businesses? Because I think that this is getting into that space. Founders, entrepreneurs, professionals. I know that I'm an educator. I was a vice principal turned entrepreneur. So this is definitely a question that's passionate for me. But those who are interested in understanding the ways that the city of Durham can support their work, right? During the lockdown, many businesses turned to the city for financial support. And I believe you spoke about this. And while some found success, some found roadblocks, right? And in thinking about what measures would you take to make sure the city of Durham, is a true partner for Durham small businesses?
So some of the things we did run a small business fund that was very successful. Duke was able to help support that effort, and we were able to convert because of federal dollars. We are barred from doing kind of direct grants to small businesses, and we knew that was something that was actually needed. But with federal dollars, we were able to do that because the same attachments to that money, the same rules weren't there. We also expanded, and this actually came up yesterday, the outdoor seating, outdoor dining program that many restaurants have said that they wanted. And so now there's a clearer process and a permanent, there was an ordinance, but we clarified it so that folks can use the outside spaces this helps restaurants and bars and small retail entities the most. So those are some of the things that we've done just for COVID response. I think the thing that became really clear to folks throughout the pandemic is that our small businesses are a huge, not just economic driver, but community space holder. And there was, I think that's what sets Durham apart in many ways. We have a thriving arts scene, we have a thriving music scene, we have many things, but the other part is that our businesses here are from here. You're not gonna necessarily find whatever it is in another city. And so we need to ensure that that continues. We need to ensure that we have a very close relationship with our Office of Economic and Workforce Development. I think we need to continue to provide better strategies, especially with our Latino businesses. We haven't really even done a lot of work there. There's not a real clear strategy about how we're going to reach those business owners, which the strategy you would use would be very, very different than some of the strategies we've used with maybe some of the businesses downtown. So I think that relationship is crucially important. I think that council in general is very supportive of our small business community, and I think we need to continue that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, one of the things that struck me during the campaign trail when I talked to small business owners, and they are the largest employer in Durham, and I'm a small business owner, own a little radio station, not making any money off of it. But, when I went to talk with them, I had gone the week before and followed Bull City United around. And so the guys in the streets had this really sad effect that they normally have, but it was deeper because the pandemic, when it hit, when regular folk get pneumonia, get a cold, the streets will get pneumonia, right? So it had really hit. And so I'm talking to them, and I go to meet with another set of business owners. And the first thing that they struck me was they had the same effect. I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen that kind of sadness. And basically they told me that they felt like that they didn't get a good response from the city. Now, I don't know, I'm just sitting there listening, trying to, because like I said, a lot of these spaces are not my spaces, so I've got to go out and I've got to listen. But I do know something about transformation in terms of a community. Northeast Central Durham and your driver. There are about 6 black business owners over there that have been holding that community down for years. Sam, my neighbor Sam, neighbor at home, we neighbor in business. Jeff Warren has a barbershop over there. The mosque, a couple of other small businesses. They've been holding it down for years, right? But 25 or 30 years ago, that place it was a thriving community somewhat until a person got killed in the parking lot at that church that now houses the DCI. The Children's Initiative, and that community just went downhill. I married a guy out of Boston, and he was a security director with Earth, Wind, and Fire. He comes off the road because we were trying to blend the family, and he says, I want to do a restaurant. I want to open a restaurant. Well, okay, let's just ride around Durham. We live fairly close. Okay, let's ride around and see what we can find. And he had a connection up in Boston where the guy sold the hot dogs, specially made, not outside of Massachusetts, and they sold it in Fenway Park. And his partner said, "Well, you can use that. We'll make you a 1 pound hot dog. You can use that as your product." So the judge's husband ends up with a hot dog cart on the corner of Andrew and Driver, right? Well, I'm at the crime cabinet one day, and I'm running to Dan Hill, who's a well-known, respected businessman in Durham. Elaine, what are you doing? We're getting ready to open a restaurant. We got a hot dog stand, because, you can imagine the joke she got behind the husband selling the hot dogs, right? And it's a 1 pound hot dog. What are you going to do? I said, we're getting ready to open the restaurant, Dan. He said, really? And the Durham Nativity School was then in that church. So Dan says, really, I want to help. This well-known businessman bought 2 buildings for us to buy back from him, sat down with us at the table to go through our personal finances. He walked us through that. The city of Durham, we wrote a grant, got money from the city of Durham to renovate those 2 buildings over there. Trosa came in and started a grocery store over there right beside Joe's Diner, and we had an internet cafe in the middle, right? So that community, those folks have been holding it down, and so we come in and we start that initiative, right? James Rogers bought the building across the street. There was a burned out shell that's now the bookstore. It was burned at the top. It was nothing in there but pigeon poop for the most part. We had to renovate those buildings, but it was a community effort. It was a community effort. Now, of course, the grocery store didn't last, Joe's Diner didn't last, but what you do have now, because Joseph was able to pivot, is a commissary, right, that has about 12 food trucks that come out of there. That's what you got to have. I lived that. We did that. And it was not only us. It was Dan Hill. It was the city of Durham. And by the way, the city, all that new sidewalk and stuff over there, city came over there and did that too. They did all of the infrastructure. So that's how you help small businesses. You have people, especially black businesses. I never owned a business other than my little law practice, but a restaurant, we had to have somebody to come in and physically help us do that. Joseph had done a little bit of that, but those are the kind of partnerships that make it work. And you can go down Andrew Driver now and you can see the results of that kind of partnership.
And that grant program still exists. We still do that. There's actually a sandwich shop in that same corridor that got money exactly for that reason. It's to help improve the building. We don't do that many of them, but while on council, we've had 3. I've supported all 3. I'm also, I don't own a business, but my husband does. And it is really hard to be a small business owner. It isn't easy. And so I'm glad that the city still has that grant program. I think that we need to continue thinking about creative ways and how we support folks. And then I think the other piece that's lacking that we've started, but pandemic and everything else, is what we know is missing for a lot of folks is that technical expertise. Who's going to come in and help you? And when I think about folks who don't speak English or there's cultural barriers, it becomes even a bigger lift. But that doesn't mean we don't do it. That means we just have to figure out how do we reach everyone? How do we help them provide that assistance and grants so that we can keep that economic engine going? We give incentives to really large corporations, especially in North Carolina, with it's JDIG, I think is the name of the program at the state level, and a lot of those places don't actually need the local money that we do a little match or whatnot, and we know that our small businesses do, and so I think that having those programs in the city is critically important.
More of that, especially for we have a history here in Durham, Hayti, Black Wall Street, so the talent is definitely here. What we lack a lot of times is the knowledge, the know-how at this point, and the ability to be able to navigate the systems to successfully come together and create an initiative that lasts. It can be done, it has been done, and I hope to be able to continue more of that. And now I got a little bit of expertise on how it's done. Oh, and by the way, I didn't get a thing out of that. Joseph got all of that during the divorce. I left with my judge's pension and the house that I lived in. So no money for me out of that initiative. But I'm so proud of that work.
Yeah.
So proud of that work.
Yeah. Both of you just talked about the small business piece, and I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this piece, but listening to you both, that what's needed is in order to support minority businesses is that knowledge and know-how, right? But then we have this element of trust and distrust, right? And so there has to be a way that we can solve for that, right? And, like as an entrepreneur myself, being around entrepreneurs, one of the things we talk a lot about is where the resources, right? And resources, we mean, where is the money, right? And how do we continue to grow and be sustainable? So my next question is something very similar to the workforce development piece, but I wanted to frame it a little bit in a different way. How do we improve almost this training development, workforce development, and I say that in such a broad term, and this may not be the right way to use it, but this source of knowledge that we are supporting Black businesses or even our youth to develop and groom them, right? That's a bigger context. But how can we improve that workforce development or that knowledge that we're giving to minority business owners to help them scale and be successful so that they can be ready for the Apples and the Amazons, right? Because they're here. And that's a fear, coming from different aspects of our community, knowing that these partners are coming in, right? So how can we improve that? How can we improve that for them?
I think you hit it when you said trust. Now, just because you build it does not mean they will come. And for a lot of the young people now, there's an underground economy that's going on right now, and people are running businesses that are very successful in their own way. So the talent pool is there. It's a matter of how you're going to take that talent pool and transfer it so that it is in an environment that's legal, right? So you got to be able to do that. The talent pool is definitely there. It has its own norms. The economy that's being run has its own norms, its own values, and all of that, right? And we see that when they become visible, when you see the street justice happens, and you see how targeted the killings are or the shootings are, right? So they have the talent, but they have no trust that the government will allow them to come into the legal side of things. So that's boots on the ground. That's boots on the ground. And one of the things that I'm involved in is Made in Durham. That's a nonprofit organization. Casey Steinbacher, who is the head of the Durham Chamber of Commerce, is our executive director right now. Vic DeZal, who is head of Duke University, is our chair. And our charge is that by the age of 24, every young person in Durham will either have a post-secondary credential or some type of technical skill, right? That's our goal. Whereas a part of that, we have what we call the Bulls Initiative to directly deal with these companies that are coming in. One of the things that has to happen is when you ask people to lay down you lay down your colors, lay down your guns, how they gonna make a living? People still gotta eat. And you gotta remember that a lot of these young people don't have a place to live. So, and they've been out of the housing grid because of their contact in a lot of times with the criminal justice system where they've been branded as a felon or they're a felon. So they're off of the housing grid. So they're making money the best way they can because everybody's gotta survive. So how do we ask them to transition without recognizing, one, I don't have a place to sleep. That's the first thing I need to have. And number two, how am I going to eat? So as a part of the Bulls Initiative, some of the companies that we're working with are going to offer a stipend for them to go to Durham Tech to get that technical skill set. Durham Tech, Lord bless J.B. Buxton and Bill Ingram, we've had some great presidents at Durham Tech. He's the new president. He's also on the Made in Durham board. They have agreed that they will provide that technical training in a truncated time so that you can really go in and you can get your certification in some of these areas within as short a time, I think, as 6 months, and maybe even shorter than that. And then this is the bonus. We're going to give you a stipend. We're going to teach you what you need to know and for this particular initiative. And then after that, you have a guaranteed interview. Now, what the community has to do, we have to get them ready for the interviews. So on that end, what I'm doing is working with former Chief Chalmers. Like I said, it's a group of us out there who've been doing this work for years. We just haven't been able to scale it. But now this money is coming in here, we ought to be able to scale some of this stuff. So I have a group of people who've been working in this arena, along with Steve, who's heading the initiative, here in McCord, some other people. We're doing a Kellogg grant, doing a couple of things so that we can provide the day-to-day training, boots on the ground. You got to go into the neighborhoods. You cannot do this from City Hall. They're not coming to City Hall. You cannot do it from any government structure. They're not coming there. So we have to literally go into those neighborhoods and begin to train young folk on how you cross cultures. Most black people know, and most people of color know, we have to cross cultures if we want to go out and make some money, because there's not a lot of money in our communities right now. So that's just part of it. But it goes back to trust. We've got to get young people willing to say, we trust you enough to lay it down, and we're going to try it your way. But we cannot lose that trust. And that's one thing that I'm committed to the streets. I won't lose my street cred. I have street cred out there, and I will not make promises to those young people that I cannot keep. And that is one of my promises, that we're going to build a trust. I'm a woman of my word, and I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And we have a group of people that can help us do it now.
Thanks for the question. So the city actually funds Made in Durham. We've funded them for a long time. And I think one of the things that we are doing a better job at that needs to continue to happen. So we have the Welcome Home program specifically designed for folks who have been formerly incarcerated to help them. We also just started the small kind of guaranteed income pilot through Step Up specifically for folks who are coming home. So that's what we're doing for those residents, which we know they face a huge amount of economic barriers. And so city's been a long, ban the box employer. We encourage folks to also do that. Additionally, beyond that, what we've done is we've expanded our Youth Works program. So there was 500 youth that were employed over the summer, and we want to continue to expand that. I think the goal is eventually 1,000 and then keep scaling that up. I know young people who actually participated in it and found it to be a fantastic program. And then the other thing that we have to do, because the part that's a little bit hard or wonky, is that we have the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. The county funds our schools and Durham Tech. And we all know so if the main institution and partners aren't working really closely together, we're not going to succeed, because we have to have the relationships and we have to have the knowledge of who holds what, but then how is it connected? Mm-hmm. And I will say that I am very happy and impressed that there has been a lot more coordination and collaboration with DPS, with the county, with Durham Tech. I think often what governments do is they know what they're doing and they silo themselves and say, okay, well, this is what the city's always done, so this is what we're going to continue to do. Make sure we have a good water system, that we fund sidewalks, and then we don't necessarily realize that there's a lot out there that we have to help support, even if we're not the ones funding it necessarily, but that we have trusted relationships so that we can continue working in that way and improving folks. We know that we're not going to have the populace educated at a level if our schools aren't having those conversations. Same with Durham Tech. Durham Tech is a huge engine. They have the Office of the Global Scholar that is an incredible program that helps folks take ESL classes, get their GEDs, helps folks who have come into our communities from other countries and helps get them on their feet and get into jobs as well.
I want to thank you both. I keep saying to myself, this is the new dawn, women leaders pioneering through. I also, Knox Street Studios, was a part of the partnership with Youth Works. We ran that. I also now have a technical program at Knox Street Studios for apprenticeship. So I'm hearing this and I'm hearing the direction it's going. And I'm thrilled, right, to be in this space with you all. So I want to thank again Kompleks Creative, the Greater Durham Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Black Wall Street. And thank you all for having us. Right, so thank you all.
Thank you
so much
for this. Thank you, Javier.
Thank you.
See you on the campaign trail.
Yes, thank you.